I should have seen the warning signs. The way Emma's eyes would light up at the sight of a designer store. The way she'd casually drop hundreds, sometimes thousands, of dollars on things she didn't need. At first, I chalked it up to a simple love for nice things. I told myself, she deserves it. She works hard too. But that was the biggest lie I ever told myself. Emma wasn't working hard. She wasn't even working at all. She had quit her marketing job 3 years into our marriage, claiming she wanted to focus on finding herself. I supported her, thinking she'd eventually figure out what she wanted. But what she wanted, it turned out, was luxury. Designer clothes, 5-star vacations, diamond-studded everything. It didn't happen all at once. At first, she'd splurge here and there, nothing too concerning. A handbag, a spa day, a new dress. But then it became a habit, an addiction. And before I knew it, our finances started to dwindle. One evening I sat at my desk, going through our bank statements. My stomach dropped. The numbers didn't make sense. The savings account we had spent years building, nearly empty. Our credit cards, maxed out. I rubbed my temples, trying to stay calm. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe some of this money had gone somewhere important. "Emma," I called out, trying to keep my voice even. She was lounging on the couch, flipping through a glossy fashion magazine. "Can you come here for a second?" She barely looked up. "What is it?" I held up the statements. "Where did all our money go?" She sighed and set the magazine down, as if I had just interrupted something crucial. "Shopping, mostly. A few trips. But don't worry. We'll earn more." Something inside me snapped. "Emma, this isn't a joke. We're practically broke. Do you even realize what you've done?" She rolled her eyes. "Oh, David, don't be so dramatic. Money is meant to be spent. We'll figure it out." That was rich coming from her. I had been the only one working, saving, planning for the future. And she had burned it all to the ground like it was nothing. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I had spent years building a life with this woman, years believing we were a team. But now I realized the truth. Emma didn't care about our future. She cared about her next shopping spree, her next luxury vacation, her next chance to flaunt wealth she hadn't earned. I couldn't do it anymore. If she wanted to live like money grew on trees, she would have to do it without me. Over the next few weeks, I made my plan. I moved money into a separate account, one she couldn't touch. I found a new apartment, small but comfortable. I spoke to a lawyer. And then, one morning, while she was still asleep in our California king-sized bed, I walked out the door and never looked back. By the time she woke up, I was gone. The house was empty. The credit cards were cancelled. The joint accounts were closed. There was nothing left for her to take. At first, she didn't believe it. She called, texted, left voicemails laced with laughter and disbelief. "Very funny, David. Where are you?" Then the messages changed. "David, you need to come home. We need to talk." And finally the truth set in. "You can't do this to me. I need you. Please." But it was too late. Emma had gotten everything she wanted for years. But now, for the first time in her life, she had to face the consequences. The credit card bills started piling up. The collectors came calling. The luxury lifestyle she had built on my hard work began to crumble. And when she realized no one was coming to save her, she did something I never expected. She showed up at my door. The moment I opened the door, I barely recognized her. The Emma I had known was always polished, perfectly put together, draped in designer clothes with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. The woman standing in front of me now looked tired. Her blonde hair, once impeccably styled, was hastily tied back, and her nails, usually manicured to perfection, were chipped and uneven. She was still wearing expensive clothes, but they were no longer new. The desperation in her eyes was undeniable. "David," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I need help." And so, before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed my keys and headed out into the night. The motel was exactly what I expected. Run down, dimly lit, the kind of place where people went to disappear. My stomach twisted as I pulled into the parking lot. I didn't know what I was walking into, but as I climbed the stairs to the second floor, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't going to end the way I thought it would. I reached room 214 and hesitated. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and what I saw inside made my blood run cold. Emma was sitting on the edge of the bed, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She looked nothing like the woman I had once known. Her once perfectly styled hair was tangled and unkempt, her expensive dress wrinkled and stained. Her makeup was smudged, as if she had either been crying or simply didn't care enough to fix it anymore. But it wasn't just her appearance that made my stomach tighten. It was the look in her eyes, hollow, haunted, defeated. She lifted her head slowly, as if even that small movement took effort. When she saw me standing in the doorway, something flickered across her face. Shock, relief, maybe even shame. "You came," she whispered. I didn't step inside. Not yet. My instincts were screaming at me to be careful. "You asked for help," I said, my voice even. "I'm here. What's going on?" Emma swallowed hard, glancing around the room as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. That's when I noticed the small bruises on her wrist, the slight tremble in her hands. "I messed up," she said finally. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." I took a slow step forward, scanning the room. The bed was unmade, the cheap nightstand covered in empty bottles and crumpled receipts. The place reeked of stale perfume and desperation. "Who are you running from, Emma?" I asked. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out at first. Then, in a voice so low I almost didn't hear it, she said, "I owe money, David. A lot of money." Of course she did. I exhaled sharply, rubbing my temple. "To who?" She hesitated, chewing on her bottom lip. "People who don't take 'I can't pay' as an answer." I clenched my jaw. "And you thought I'd fix this for you?" A flicker of something, maybe hope, passed through her tired eyes. I didn't know where else to turn. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about this. "You turned everywhere else first, didn't you? And when they all said no, you came to me." Emma flinched but didn't argue. I should have walked away. Right then. Right there. I should have turned around and left her to deal with the consequences of her choices. But as much as I wanted to be done with her, I couldn't ignore the fact that she was afraid. Really afraid. "How much do you owe?" I asked, my voice tight. She swallowed. 60 grand. I let out a low whistle. "Jesus, Emma." "I thought I could pay it back," she said quickly. I had a plan, but then everything fell apart. And now? Now they're looking for me. "Who are they?" I pressed. Her eyes darted to the window. "Guys you don't want to meet." I could feel the anger simmering just beneath my skin. She had done this to herself. She had burned through everything, used up every favor. And now, when she had nowhere else to run, she was standing in front of me expecting what? A miracle. But as much as I wanted to tell her she was on her own, something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of who she used to be, or maybe it was the quiet, desperate way she was looking at me now, like she had finally realized too late that she had ruined everything. I sighed heavily. I'm not giving you 60 grand, Emma. That's not happening. Her face fell, but I wasn't done. But I will help you fix this. Her eyes widened. How? I didn't know yet. But one thing was clear. Emma wasn't just drowning in debt. She was in real danger. And whether I liked it or not, I was now caught in the middle of it. And something told me that whoever was looking for her wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. Emma's world had finally collapsed. The people she had been running from had found her. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. A part of me had expected this moment, but I wasn't sure how it would feel when it finally happened. Anger, satisfaction, pity, maybe a mixture of all three. You already got all the help you needed, I said evenly. You just didn't take it. Her lips parted, as if she was about to argue, but no words came out. Instead, she exhaled sharply and ran a hand through her hair. I messed up, okay? I see that now. She looked down at her hands, gripping them tightly. I don't know what to do. For years, I had been her safety net. No matter how recklessly she spent, I had always been there to clean up the mess. But I wasn't that man anymore. What do you expect me to say, Emma? I asked, my voice firm. That I'll fix everything? That I'll take you back? She swallowed hard, her eyes darting past me, as if she was looking for something. Some remnant of our past life together. I don't have anywhere else to go. That hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Emma had burned through every bridge, every resource, every last favor. And now, she was standing here, hoping I'd be the one person left who would still catch her when she fell. But I had already let go. I studied her for a long moment, remembering the woman she used to be, the woman I had loved, the woman I had fought for. But the Emma standing before me now wasn't just desperate. She was lost. And for the first time, I wondered if she had ever really known who she was, beyond the luxury, beyond the endless pursuit of status. You don't have anywhere else to go, I repeated, my voice calm but unyielding. And whose fault is that, Emma? She flinched, as if the words physically struck her. I wasn't thinking, David. I thought everything would work out, that I'd find a way, that... She let out a bitter laugh and shook her head. God, I was so stupid. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say that hadn't already been said. Emma took a shaky breath and looked up at me again. Just let me in. Please. I don't expect you to fix everything. I don't know where else to turn. A year ago, I would have folded in an instant. But that version of me was gone. You're right, I said. You don't know where to turn because you spent your entire life looking for the next luxury instead of building something real. I warned you. I begged you to stop. And you laughed at me. You told me money would always come, that I was being too cautious, too paranoid. She bit her lip, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I know. I shook my head. No, Emma. You don't know. You never did. Silence stretched between us. For the first time she had nothing to say. No excuses, no justifications, just the crushing weight of reality settling in. I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. What do you want from me, Emma? Be honest. She hesitated. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, she said, I want another chance. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. Another chance. After everything. I looked into her eyes, searching for something, some sign that she truly understood the depth of the damage she had caused. But all I saw was fear, not regret, not love, just fear. I nodded slowly as if considering her request. Then I stepped back, and with the same calmness I had carried since the day I left, I closed the door in her face. I stood there for a long moment, my hand still on the doorknob, my heart hammering in my chest. I could hear her on the other side, her breath hitching, the muffled sound of a sob being swallowed down. For a brief second, doubt crept in. Was I being too harsh? Was this the moment where I was supposed to soften, to show kindness, to let her in just for old time's sake? But then I remembered. I remembered the sleepless nights, staring at bank statements that told me our future was slipping through my fingers. I remembered the dismissive way she had laughed when I begged her to slow down, to think beyond the next shopping spree. I remembered how she had drained our savings with the same ease as someone tossing away spare change. No, I wasn't being too harsh. I was finally giving her what she had always needed: consequences. Her footsteps didn't move. She was still out there, standing in the hallway, probably waiting, hoping, expecting me to cave. Emma had spent her whole life knowing that if she pushed hard enough, if she played the right game, she could always get what she wanted. Not this time. I turned and walked away from the door. Minutes passed. Maybe 10. Maybe 20. Then finally I heard it. The slow shuffle of feet. The reluctant acceptance of reality. She was leaving. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. For the first time in a long time, I felt weightless. Emma wasn't my problem anymore. Days passed, then weeks. Emma didn't come back. No more knocks at my door, no more desperate pleas. At first, I expected her to find another way, to latch onto someone else who could fund her lifestyle. But nothing happened. It was as if she had vanished. Curiosity gnawed at me. Not because I wanted her back, but because I wanted to know. Had she finally learned? Or was she just drowning somewhere, still refusing to admit the truth? One evening, after a long day at work, I found myself scrolling through social media, my fingers hesitating before typing her name. I hadn't looked her up since the divorce, hadn't wanted to, but now I needed to see. Her once carefully curated feed of designer outfits, exotic vacations, and 5-star restaurants was gone. In its place, there were only a few sporadic posts, a blurry selfie, a cheap coffee in a styrofoam cup, a view from what looked like a small, bare apartment. She had fallen far. I clicked on the latest post. The caption read, "Starting over is harder than I thought." For a brief moment, I felt something close to sympathy. She had built her entire existence around wealth and status. Now, without it, who was she? But then I remembered, this wasn't just something that had happened to her. This was something she had done to herself. I locked my phone and set it aside. Emma's journey was no longer mine to follow. Months passed, and Emma became nothing more than a distant memory, an old chapter in a book I had closed for good. My life had changed in ways I hadn't expected. Without the constant weight of her financial recklessness, I had rebuilt my savings, moved into a nicer apartment, and even started dating again. It wasn't anything serious yet, but it was refreshing to be with someone who didn't see me as a walking wallet. Then, one afternoon as I was leaving work, I saw her, Emma. She was standing outside a small cafe, hunched over a steaming cup of coffee, staring blankly at the sidewalk as people passed by. She looked thinner, not in a polished, gym-toned way, but in a way that spoke of stress, of skipped meals, of survival. I could have walked away. I should have walked away. But something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe the remnants of what we once had, made me stop. She must have felt my eyes on her because she looked up. And when she saw me, her breath hitched. For a moment neither of us moved. Then carefully, I approached. "Emma," I said, my voice even, neutral. She blinked, as if unsure whether she should be relieved or ashamed. "David." Up close I could see the faint traces of dark circles under her eyes, the way her designer coat, once a symbol of excess, now seemed out of place on her thinner frame. "You look different," I said. A weak laugh escaped her lips. "Yeah, well, life does that to you." I studied her, waiting for the usual act. The charm, the excuses, the attempts to manipulate. But for once there was none of it. Just a woman who had finally run out of places to hide. "What happened to you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She sighed, wrapping her hands around the coffee cup as if drawing warmth from it. "I hit rock bottom. No money, no safety net. I lost the condo, sold most of my stuff just to stay afloat. Tried finding someone to help, but..." She shook her head, a bitter smile on her lips. "Turns out, when all you have to offer is an expensive taste in handbags, people lose interest fast." I didn't respond. What was there to say? This was the future I had warned her about, the reality she had laughed off. She looked up at me again, her eyes searching mine. "I don't expect anything from you, David. I don't know. I guess I just wanted you to know that you were right." There it was, the admission I had once begged for. But hearing it now, it didn't bring the satisfaction I had imagined. Because the truth was, I had already moved on. I nodded slowly. "I hope you figure things out, Emma." She swallowed, nodding back. "Yeah, me too." And just like that, I turned and walked away. This time for good. As I walked away from Emma, I felt a strange emptiness. Not a sense of satisfaction, not relief. Just a hollow, quiet feeling that I couldn't quite place. I had wanted her to acknowledge her mistakes, to face the consequences of her actions. And yet, now that she had, now that I had finally gotten what I wanted, there was no celebration, no victory dance in my heart. Maybe it was because, despite everything, I had once loved her. Maybe it was because seeing her like that, broken, struggling, and alone, reminded me of the person she had been before the greed, before the reckless spending. I remembered the good times, the way we'd once laughed together, the dreams we had shared about building a future. But those memories were ghosts now, nothing but faded echoes of what could have been. And I couldn't afford to keep clinging to them. I had to keep moving forward. Over the next few weeks, I kept my distance from Emma. I saw her a few more times, always in passing, always by accident. But I kept my focus on my own life. I had a routine now. I was more than just the man who had been used, more than the one who had been drained dry. I had rebuilt myself. And then, one evening, out of nowhere, I received a letter. It wasn't an email, or a text, or even a phone call. It was an old-fashioned, handwritten letter, the kind you hardly ever see anymore. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Emma's. I stared at the envelope for a long time, unsure of what I was about to read. For a moment I considered throwing it away, ignoring it completely. But curiosity won out. Slowly, I opened the envelope and pulled out the single sheet of paper. "David, I don't know what to say to you. I don't know if you'll even read this. I don't know if I deserve to be heard. But I can't move on without saying this. I was selfish. I was foolish. I was blind. I thought money, luxury and status were everything. I thought they could fill the void in my life, make me feel important, make me feel loved. But I was wrong. You were right all along. And I'm sorry. I've lost everything. My home, my friends, my reputation. I thought I could just start over, that I could fix it all with a smile, with a new wardrobe, with the right people in my life. But the truth is, I was never really living. I was always just pretending. You tried to warn me. You tried to protect me. And I ignored you. I dismissed you. And now, I have nothing left but regret. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I deserve forgiveness. I just need you to know that I see the truth now. I see everything I've lost. And I realize, too late, that you were the one thing that mattered. If you ever find it in your heart to talk to me again, I would understand. If not, I'll understand that too. But I had to say it. I'm sorry. Emma sat there for a long time, the letter still in my hands, feeling a strange mix of emotions. There was no denying it. Her words were real, raw, and for the first time, I could see the genuine remorse in her. But did that change anything? Did it change the fact that she had drained everything I had, emotionally and financially? Did it change the fact that she had never truly cared for the life we were building together? I didn't know. I really didn't. But one thing was clear. She was no longer the person I once knew. The woman who had demanded more and more, who had laughed off every warning, who had believed the world owed her something. She was gone. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward redemption. I folded the letter and put it in a drawer. I didn't throw it away. I didn't respond to it either. It wasn't time for that. Maybe it never would be. But the truth was, I had already forgiven her. Not for her sake, but for mine. Because holding on to anger, holding on to resentment, would only weigh me down. I closed the drawer and moved forward. Life wasn't perfect. The scars from the past would always be there, but I was no longer defined by them. I had let go, and that, in itself, was freedom. As the weeks passed, life began to take on a rhythm again. My job, my apartment, my new circle of friends. It all felt steady, comfortable even. I was rebuilding, piece by piece, the foundation of a life that was mine, free from the chaos and unpredictability Emma had brought. But there were moments when I'd be alone, walking home from work, or sitting in the quiet of my apartment, when I would find myself thinking about her again. Not the Emma of the past, not the woman who had drained our savings and shattered the trust we had built, but the one who had written that letter. The woman who, for the first time, admitted her mistakes and showed real vulnerability. I couldn't help but wonder what she was doing now. Was she getting back on her feet? Was she still fighting the same battle with herself, the same addiction to luxury that had torn everything apart? Or had she finally learned? I didn't have answers, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I even needed them. But then, one evening, my phone buzzed. I picked it up, expecting a notification from a friend or maybe a work email. Instead, it was a message from an unknown number. I hesitated before opening it. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear from anyone connected to Emma, but my curiosity, that familiar nagging feeling, pushed me to tap on the screen. The message was short, to the point. "David, I need to talk. It's important." No name, no context, just those few words. I stared at it for a moment, trying to make sense of it. The message felt urgent, and yet the anonymity of it felt strange. Was this really Emma? Had she changed her number? Or was it someone else? Someone from her life that I didn't know about? My thumb hovered over the phone screen, ready to delete the message. But I stopped myself. What if it was important? What if, after everything, she was truly asking for help in a way that was more than just her usual manipulations? I took a deep breath and typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came almost immediately. "It's Emma. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I really need to talk. Can we meet?" I sat back in my chair, feeling a sudden, tight knot form in my stomach. What could she possibly want now? Hadn't she already shown me the depths of her despair? What more could she need from me? I thought about it for a long time. In some ways, I felt like I had done my part. I'd let her go. I'd forgiven her. And I had moved on. But then again, I couldn't deny that there was still a part of me that wondered about her. A part of me that wanted to know how her story ended, whether it was with redemption or with the same self-destructive patterns that had plagued her before. I typed back, "Where?" A few minutes later, she responded with a location. A small park on the edge of the city. It was a place we used to go to. A quiet spot where we'd talk for hours when we first started dating. I hadn't been there in years. I didn't know why I agreed. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe there was still some small part of me that believed in the woman I had once known. The one who wasn't just defined by her mistakes. But as I made my way to the park, I found myself questioning whether I was making the right choice. Was this closure, or was I just reopening a wound that had finally begun to heal? When I arrived, I saw her sitting on one of the benches, her back straight, her posture stiff. She looked so different from the last time I saw her. No longer dressed in her designer clothes, no longer flaunting the image of someone who had everything. She wore a simple jacket, jeans and sneakers. Her hair was messy, not styled like it once was. She looked real. She looked like someone who had been through something. I approached slowly, my steps hesitant. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the Emma I had known. When she saw me, she stood up. There was a long pause before she spoke, her voice quieter than I remembered. "David, I'm sorry for everything, for all the pain I caused, for everything I took from you." Her eyes were filled with a depth of regret that I hadn't seen in a long time. "I know this probably doesn't change anything, but I wanted you to know that I'm finally trying. I've been in therapy, working on myself, and I realized that I've been living in a fantasy for so long that I couldn't see the truth. I didn't know who I was until I lost everything." I stared at her, unsure of how to respond. Part of me wanted to believe her, but part of me remembered the past. The lies, the selfishness, the way she had treated me like I was just a tool to help her get what she wanted. Could people really change that much? "I'm not asking for anything," she continued, her voice trembling. "I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I don't want to keep running from the truth anymore." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of her admission. And for a moment I felt a pang of something. Maybe it was sympathy. Maybe it was a long-buried feeling of love. But it quickly passed. "I appreciate that, Emma," I said slowly, my voice steady. "But I've moved on. You're not the same person you were, but neither am I. We're not the same anymore." She nodded, her face a mask of regret, but there was something else in her eyes now, a quiet understanding. "I know," she whispered. "I just needed you to know that I'm trying." And with that, I turned and walked away. This time there was no hesitation. There was no longing, no unresolved emotions. There was just the calm acceptance of what had been and what was no longer. I had let go. And in that moment, I realized that was the greatest gift I could give myself. As I walked away from Emma that evening, something inside me felt lighter. It wasn't happiness, not exactly. It was more like a quiet, settled feeling, like finally closing the last page of a book that had taken years to finish. I didn't look back, didn't hesitate. Whatever her path was now, it was hers alone to walk. I had done my part, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly free. The days that followed were strange. Not in an unsettling way, but in the way life shifts when a weight you've carried for too long is suddenly gone. I went to work with a clearer head, laughed a little more with friends, and found myself thinking less and less about Emma. It was as if she had become a ghost of my past, someone I once knew, someone who had once meant everything, but now was just a distant memory. And then one evening, just as I was beginning to believe I had put everything behind me, I got another message. It wasn't from Emma this time. It was from an unknown number, different from the one she had used before. The message was brief, but it sent a chill down my spine. Thought you should know. Emma's in trouble. Real trouble. I stared at the words, my mind racing. Trouble? What kind of trouble? I debated ignoring it, telling myself that whatever was happening in her life now wasn't my responsibility. But the nagging feeling wouldn't leave. Before I could stop myself, I typed back, "Who is this?" A few minutes later, another message came through. "You don't know me, but I know Emma. She's been mixed up with some bad people. I think she's in over her head. You might be the only person who cares enough to help." I exhaled sharply, rubbing my forehead. Number no. I wasn't the only person who could help. She had family. She had friends. She had people who could step in. People who weren't me. I had done my part. I had walked away. I had let her go. But despite everything, a part of me still couldn't ignore it. Against my better judgment, I responded. "Where is she?" The reply came quickly. "A motel outside the city. Room 214. Come fast." I shouldn't have gone. I knew that. But something in my gut told me that whatever was happening, it was serious. This wasn't just another cry for attention, another scheme to pull me back in. This was real. And so, before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed my keys and headed out into the night. The motel was exactly what I expected. Run down, dimly lit, the kind of place where people went to disappear. My stomach twisted as I pulled into the parking lot. I didn't know what I was walking into, but as I climbed the stairs to the second floor, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't going to end the way I thought it would. I reached room 214 and hesitated. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open, and what I saw inside made my blood run cold. Emma was sitting on the edge of the bed, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She looked nothing like the woman I had once known. Her once perfectly styled hair was tangled and unkempt, her expensive dress wrinkled and stained. Her makeup was smudged, as if she had either been crying or simply didn't care enough to fix it anymore. But it wasn't just her appearance that made my stomach tighten. It was the look in her eyes, hollow, haunted, defeated. She lifted her head slowly, as if even that small movement took effort. When she saw me standing in the doorway, something flickered across her face. Shock, relief, maybe even shame. "You came," she whispered. I didn't step inside. Not yet. My instincts were screaming at me to be careful. "You asked for help," I said, my voice even. "I'm here. What's going on? Emma swallowed hard, glancing around the room as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. That's when I noticed the small bruises on her wrist, the slight tremble in her hands. I messed up, she said finally. I didn't have anywhere else to go. I took a slow step forward, scanning the room. The bed was unmade, the cheap nightstand covered in empty bottles and crumpled receipts. The place reeked of stale perfume and desperation. Who are you running from, Emma? I asked. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out at first. Then, in a voice so low I almost didn't hear it, she said, I owe money, David. A lot of money. Of course she did. I exhaled sharply, rubbing my temple. To who? She hesitated, chewing on her bottom lip. People who don't take I can't pay as an answer. I clenched my jaw. And you thought I'd fix this for you? A flicker of something, maybe hope, passed through her tired eyes. I didn't know where else to turn. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about this. You turned everywhere else first, didn't you? And when they all said no, you came to me. Emma flinched but didn't argue. I should have walked away. Right then. Right there. I should have turned around and left her to deal with the consequences of her choices. But as much as I wanted to be done with her, I couldn't ignore the fact that she was afraid. Really afraid. How much do you owe? I asked, my voice tight. She swallowed. 60 grand. I let out a low whistle. Jesus, Emma. I thought I could pay it back, she said quickly. I had a plan, but then everything fell apart. And now? Now they're looking for me. Who are they? I pressed. Her eyes darted to the window. Guys you don't want to meet. I could feel the anger simmering just beneath my skin. She had done this to herself. She had burned through everything, used up every favor. And now, when she had nowhere else to run, she was standing in front of me expecting what? A miracle. But as much as I wanted to tell her she was on her own, something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of who she used to be, or maybe it was the quiet, desperate way she was looking at me now, like she had finally realized too late that she had ruined everything. I sighed heavily. I'm not giving you 60 grand, Emma. That's not happening. Her face fell, but I wasn't done. But I will help you fix this. Her eyes widened. How? I didn't know yet. But one thing was clear. Emma wasn't just drowning in debt. She was in real danger. And whether I liked it or not, I was now caught in the middle of it. And something told me that whoever was looking for her wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. Emma's world had finally collapsed. The people she had been running from had found her,